So those are, you got your big two, our haste and hate. A third one we throw in there that can be of real concern, of course, is HAFE. Something that you and your teammates will have to deal with. Anybody experienced HAFE? That would be high altitude flatulence. It is a very real thing and a real condition, and it's mostly just pick your tent mates well with that one. But let's talk about the things that may not kill you but could be really inconvenient and in really extreme circumstances could kill you. So we've got to deal with cold and heat injuries. You didn't think about heat injuries. Mike mentioned it last time. When you're out there and you've got all the reflected heat of the glacier, it's amazing how warm it can get. I sat at high camp on the Denali West Rib, and I was lying in my tent, resting, completely stripped down to my underwear, no shoes on, no shirt, and I was warm with all the reflected heat off the glacier. It could not have been higher than 15 degrees outside, but it's amazing how warm you can get. So we'll look at both cold and heat. Let's start with hypothermia. This is one of the fun ones. They've redefined it. When I took my course this summer, I kept calling somebody mildly hypothermic, and the instructor kept correcting me and says, no, he's just cold. So what used to be, when I first took first aid classes, be called mild hypothermia, is now just really cold. And the big thing is if you're still moving, if you're mobile, if you're thinking okay, and you're shivering, then you're just really cold. But basically, hypothermia is a decrease in your body's core temperature. Simply defined. Big thing for hypothermia is keep an eye on each other. This is one that your partners might pick up before you do. Because one of the first things that hypothermia does is when you get a decrease in body core, it decreases your blood flow to your frontal cortex, which is your logic and reasoning center. So you decide that everything's fine. And your partners start noticing, hey, you're shivering. Have you noticed that? Or worse, you've stopped shivering and you haven't put any new clothing on. So this is one you got to be careful as a team. I know, and we'll talk a little bit more in the team and group dynamics lecture, but I know one team on Denali, they chose to cook together rather than individually because they wanted an excuse to put the entire team in the same tent every night so they could look at each other and check in on each other. So a lot of things can go in there. Biggest preventer: proper clothing, proper food, proper hydration. I love it being an outdoors person and having the gear and stuff that I do. Every once in a while I get a no school day because it's just too cold and we can't have the little kids at the bus stop, and we certainly can't have people being outside. I'm like, yeah, I've spent days at sub-zero temperatures, and what I do is I dress properly and I eat a ton. And I drink a ton. So the big things for proper clothing, if stuff gets wet, you got to change out of it. I'm very, very vigilant. If you go on the graduation climb, when we get to our Camp Sherman on Mount Rainier, as soon as my tent is up and I've stopped moving, I am in my tent and putting on dry clothing if I've sweat a lot on the way up there. Being really vigilant about getting stuff off of you when you're cold and you sweat a lot. Making sure you've got some dry stuff. I go pretty ultra light, but I pretty much always have a second layer to put next to my skin because I sweat a lot and I don't want to have to generate the heat to dry it out. So really making sure you're taking care of yourself is the best preventative for hypothermia. Getting dry quickly if you do get wet, important. Warm, sweet liquids. If you're severely cold or you're mildly hypothermic, And mild hypothermia is now defined as your body core that you've dropped enough that you're not shivering anymore, your body can't compensate. Even if it's just a really cold morning. This was one I learned I spent years taking groups of kids into the outdoors, and hot Jello. I always had gelatin mix, the little instant Jello mix. It is pure sugar. It is flavored sugar. And I would heat up water and I would pour that in it, and I would pour that in my kids, and man, they would get better fast if they were starting to lose it. Interestingly, I've had far more issues with hypothermia at 35 degrees and raining than I've ever had at 20 below and snowing. As I say, 35 and raining scares me. 20 below, whatever. But warm, sweet, if you carry Gatorade, if you carry Kool-Aid, something really sugary that you can get in, and that's kind of your instant pick them back up, and then you got to get some real food in. If you need to rewarm somebody, the old saw of get them in the sleeping bag with another warm body, all that does is it creates two cold bodies. No, we're not going there. But getting them into a sleeping bag with a chemical warmer on their chest and under their arms, that's a pretty good thing. Hot water bottles on their chest, under their arms. You want to try to rewarm them from the inside out. So hypothermia, if you do a full-on hypothermia wrap, getting somebody into a sleeping bag, into dry clothing, getting a bunch of the chemical heater things in there. I've done these as simulated things in first aid classes, and usually before the simulation is over, the person who's the victim is calling to get out because it is so hot. So if you get somebody who's that severe, good news is out in the field you can get somebody back from hypothermia, and you get food and water in them, they can go on. It's not a necessary evac. But the best thing, prevent. And like anything else, you want to prevent it with food and water and proper clothing. Okay. Frostbite. Frostbite is pretty real and can become an evacuation situation. Used to call it first, second, and third degree. Now it's superficial, full thick, or partial thickness, and full thickness are the things. Superficial is you might have some discoloration. Let's say it's on a digit, it might be a little white, it might be a little splotchy. But if somebody warm goes like that for long enough, or you go like that for long enough, you can get it pretty much back right away. If it's getting a little more severe, you might have some pain on rewarming. But most of the time, doing that, my quickest thing, and it's something that people it took me a while to get used to it, is throwing an extra layer on. Usually if my fingertips are getting cold, it's because I don't have enough on my body core. And just getting into that thought process, it took me a while. I always think my fingers are cold, I better put heavier gloves on. Now my first thought might be to put the heavier gloves on, but it might be to put my down jacket on. So think about what layers are on your core, because really frostbite to a digit is telling you that there isn't enough blood circulation leaving your core, and that means your warm blood is shunting in to protect the body's vital systems. So if you rewarm the core, you might prevent frostbite out on a digit. Okay, partial thickness. This is when it definitely is going to be painful to rewarm. If you've got blebs, aka blisters, that's something where you might need to get the person out of there, because that can refreeze once you warm it. And you don't want a warm digit to freeze again. But if you've got, again, severe loss of motion would be under partial thickness, some discoloration, some splotchiness. Those are all things. And the biggest difference between superficial and partial, unless you've got blisters, is how much it hurts to rewarm. I've had partial back when I was a teenager in the Boy Scouts doing an awful lot of outdoor stuff wrong. Never assume that somebody's been in the Boy Scout and knows what they're doing. I've since learned enough to know, my God, I should have died at least 10 times when I was 16. And one of those occasions I got some partial thickness frostbite to my hands, 35-degree rainstorm. And you know, my dad came and picked me up from the trip, and we were driving home, and I was in tears, literally crying as my hands rewarmed for at least 20 minutes of the car ride home. But the good news is, partial thickness, you can bring them back, you can get them fed, you can get them hydrated, get proper layers on them, and they're going to be okay. What's not going to be okay is full thickness. Full thickness, I think I have a similar shock value slides here. This is another person not on our team on Shishapangma. This is Val. If you were taking this class in Boulder, she'd be your instructor. This was a result of, at our high camp on Shishapangma, I said we had 3 amazing summit days right in a row. She was up there on day 4 with her partner Monty. And they got to the summit, and we still aren't quite sure the exact how this happened, but a pretty bad windstorm blew up. Their tent blew away, leaving them though, but somehow some of their gear that had been in the tent didn't blow away. We don't know how. But this was Val after a night out at 24,000 feet. She and her partner was in rough shape. She kept both of them alive and got them down. So she's an impressive human being. She also had a really bad frostbite. Notice anything interesting about which fingers?
Yeah, so we read this one.
It's the ones on her ice axe.
It's the ones touching her ice axe. This is what her feet looked like. She lost the tips of a couple of her toes after this. I remember seeing her about a month later and asking her how she was doing. But she's still climbing.
What does that mean for her fingers, though? I mean, do those stay?
No, they eventually came back. She might have lost edges of fingertips. I've seen her several times since this, and I've never noticed that she was missing parts of her finger. So.
But people do lose.
You can lose stuff. Yeah. So that's full thickness, and that's ugly, and you don't want it.
Just kind of digging into this. So I have bad circulation, so my hands and feet always get cold. So can we talk like a little bit more about like preventative measures or like the best ways to prevent? Because I mean, it's just
the number one, especially if you've got some limited circulation. Number one, feed and hydrate. Number 2, keep your body core warm. Again, making sure that you've got your body so warm that it's not shunting blood away from your extremities. Good gloves and mittens and keeping them dry and having some to swap into. The last thing, the chemical warmers. I would keep a supply of them. And one of the things I noticed with the chemical warmers, the fancy smancy ones that REI sells suck. And they don't always work. The generic, really cheap ones from Walmart and Costco, I've never had fail. So go cheap. And you got big boxes. Yeah, I mean Costco right now, you can get a box of foot warmers for $10. It's awesome. I mean that's really what you got to do, and it's time and experience and knowing what your body's symptomology is. There's no great cure for it. But I know people who have what's the syndrome? Raynaud's.
I've taken this class.
Who have taken this class and who have climbed and who are really active climbers. It's a matter of really so much of this stuff is getting to know yourself and what's going to work in your body, and that's why you do lots of little climbs before you go to the huge climbs.
Oh, go ahead.
Aaron the mat.
Whatever the second one is called, was that superficial thickness?
Partial. Partial thickness.
So I got that on all my toes.
Uh-huh.
And so I'm interested, how do you keep the chemical warmers in your boots? Like, where do you put them in your boots?
In my case, I have a pretty high arch. I put them under the arch a lot.
Okay.
It's where they fit without making your boots uncomfortable. They're designed to go on the top of your feet.
On the top of your feet?
Yeah,
With all the
Under
veins.
your sock.
yeah.
But that doesn't like get caught, like, I don't know, the pressure with like your like laces or?
You know, again, it's one of those things. Everybody's boots fit different and everybody's feet are shaped different. Try it and see. With a lot of this stuff, you know, with Mike said it with equipment, I'll say it again when we get to the planning and group dynamics lecture. So much of this is practice and just getting to know what works and constantly evaluating what works for you. I do a lot of things in town to check it out when I don't need it. I wear chemical warmers on warm days when I'm ice climbing because I want to know how my boots fit with them in. And I experiment with, oh, well, that feels uncomfortable, let me put it here. And do it on a low stress day when you don't really need them. And deal with the fact that your feet are going to sweat one day when you're on a 14er. But then you know. That's why I took Diamox on a 14er. I hated it. But I knew that now, and now that's, so I know what my body's going to feel like when I take Diamox. So a lot of this is just, there's time and experience factors of just constantly figuring out what system's going to work for you.
I was going to ask if there's, as far as like gloves or socks, the battery operated stuff, is there anything worth half a crap? Like, is any of the...
Haven't used them.
There are some out there, I haven't used them either, but there are some out there, even via like Explorer's Web and some other places, that are getting pretty sophisticated.
Okay.
You're very reliant, or potentially very reliant, but before I'd always dismiss it.
Right.
And I think there's some out there that are potentially worth looking at if you were doing something that significant and had a propensity to some kind of problems like that.
I guess two things with chemical warmers, and I don't know if you're true or not, so if you could help me in some myth, is that one, they can expire, and then two, whether or not they have to have enough oxygen to actually start to warm them up.
Not that I'm aware of to number one, and yes to number two. That's why I think Mike mentioned it. I carry exclusively foot warmers because they're designed to work inside your shoe, which is a lower oxygen environment than inside a glove. And what I find at high altitude, I have to let them sit outside my shoe for a minute or two and feel them start to get warm, and then I stick them on my foot. Whereas down in town, I might just stick them on my foot right away. So yeah, they aren't foolproof. So you have a few extras. But they are, an effective means of warming stuff up and keeping stuff from getting bad. Okay. Another one, immersion foot, aka trench foot. This is continual dampness and cold. If you're going out for days at a time and your feet never get dry, this can happen. This is why Mike and I share a compulsion for dry socks. I don't carry extra of much. I carry extra socks because I don't want this. And that's one. I don't know how we both developed this habit independently, but I also carry a clean pair of socks for Summit Day. Figure they're my emergency backup socks. And if I haven't used them yet, I put on fresh socks for the summit. It just feels good on my feet. But you gotta work on keeping your feet dry. So if you get that warm sunny day on Denali where you're laying in your tent and it's hot, take your socks off. Let your feet air. You could even have just a little pack towel and dry them off. I have daytime socks and I have nighttime socks. That's a given. You gotta have something dry on your feet. So that's one way to go.
On socks, I agree with having a separate pair for night because they keep your feet warm. But I wear silk liners and then I wear a padded sock.
Mhm.
The moisture that comes out of my body, the sweat that comes out of my body and goes through the silk liner and goes into my sock, is that more than just water? Because those don't really seem to dry. Once they're wet and I need
It's
to
sweat.
change them, is it just, but what is
Sweat.
sweat? Is it?
It's
It's
water
not just
plus
water.
salt.
But they don't really seem to ever get dry.
Well, yeah, it's very difficult because again, you're in that, they're back in the boot environment. And depending on the material, materials have different abilities to dry. I also, let's say I have daytime sock and I have a nighttime sock. And I'm usually, as my base layer, I will have either long underwear or maybe a pair of shorts. And in the elastic, I stick my wet socks, and that's what I'm drying them in my sleeping bag overnight, right up against my body. Another good thing with liner gloves and sometimes with my liner socks, if I'm walking around, I'm messing around, I'm cooking breakfast, up on my shoulders, I can lay them over my shoulders underneath my clothing, and they'll dry with glove liners. So your body is your best means of drying something in the field.
So going back to the sleeping bag, when you want to keep your clothes, certain clothes in your bag and your shoes to keep warm and or dry in your bag, if you sleep in a liner inside your sleeping bag, would you put them inside the liner with you, outside the liner, between the liner and the bag?
There's some personal preference there.
Okay.
They'll dry faster up against your body. You'll sleep colder with wet stuff up against your body.
Okay.
And less comfortably.
I've had an issue before where I put stuff that needs to dry in my down sleeping bag, and it's made the foot backs of my bag a little wet, and then it doesn't get dry because it's down, and then it makes it colder down there. So isn't there a little bit of pro and con to putting wet stuff to dry out in your bag because it's going to get absorbed by the down,
Absolutely.
and then that's going to get wet? Because I've had then my feet start getting cold at night because my foot box is wet because I put all my wet stuff down there.
Yes. So there is no 100% perfect way to do this. And again, it comes back to time and experience and conditions and looking at what peak are you on? How long are you going to be out? What's the risk? On Mount Rainier, the risk of having a little bit of dampness in my down sleeping bag, I'll get over it. Even though, Mount Rainier is pretty moist to have it. People who live in the Northwest don't carry down.
Yeah.
I travel there, I'll carry down. If I'm on Denali, the risk of my down sleeping bag and I've got 2 more weeks out there, I might make a different decision about what to do with my wet stuff. It's just like so many things, it depends. And that's why really, again, with this class, we want you to be thinking through these things. And there isn't one right answer. And you want to know why. And then be able to evaluate and make a decision.
One of the ways to dry your socks, other than putting them inside your bag, is to lay them on top of your sleeping pad and put your sleeping bag on top of that. And the heat transfer between the two will warm your socks and heat dry them out.
That's a good one.
I've tried that and it's
Yeah.
worked.
Okay, immersion foot. Again, you can get heat injuries out there, heat exhaustion. This is another one. They've moved heat exhaustion, they've moved the scale up. They moved it down for hypothermia. So heat exhaustion, basically any weakness and injury caused by it being too hot is now called heat exhaustion. I used to call it just being overheated. But you got dehydration, dizziness, fatigue. Again, it's basically, I've heard Mike use the analogy, the easy bake oven effect. If you ever had the little kids' easy bake oven and you use the mirrors and the light bulb to cook things, if you got glaciers on that side and glaciers on this side and glaciers below you, you've got sun bouncing all of that, you got high altitude sun, you can be really, really hot. And to keep hydrated, you have to melt snow, which is a really time-consuming and fuel-consuming process. So maybe you skimp on that, and maybe you don't drink as much. Or maybe you're not used to peeing in front of other people, and you're tied on a rope team, and I'm not going to stop and go to the bathroom in front of all these people, so I'm not going to drink that much. Forgive the implied sexism here, but women have more of a problem typically with that than men. I've run into a lot more women who get dehydrated because they simply don't drink enough because they don't want to pee. That's why funnels are a really good thing. But there are all kinds of reasons that people might not drink enough. And you get really hot, and it's amazing how much water you can go through, even in the wintertime on a high altitude peak. So look out for dehydration, dizziness, fatigue, and big things. Sun protection, good layering system so you can peel down. And sun protection, good place. I don't know if you spent much time with that last week. SPFs of 25 or greater, generally, including your lip stuff. There is a chapstick with SPF 30 in it. It was interesting. I quoted this because somewhere along the line I've read on a couple of different sources, oh, you can't use sunscreen after it's been around for 6 months. And we had a chemistry professor in the class, and he said, oh, that's a bunch of crap. He went and looked up the ingredients. He said sunscreen lasts forever. It's a really good thing to know because I buy all the expired sunscreen really cheap. So sunscreen, you got to use it liberally. This is one of those routine items. I don't care if I'm waking up at 5 in the morning or if I'm waking up in midnight. While I'm eating breakfast, I put my sunscreen on. It's just what I do. Because when the sun happens to rise and you've been out climbing for 4 hours already, it may not be convenient for you to stop and put it on, or you may forget. So just find a routine. I also carry a little pouch, it's a passport pouch, but it carries my sunblock and my lip stuff and a couple of, a goo or two. Just stuff I might need to get to really quickly during the day. If you've got a bib with a pouch in it, you want to keep that stuff handy and reapply. You don't want to get sunburned out there. It can happen. Boom. At some point I'll have to pull out my pictures of Rick Keach on Rainier. A lot of you guys know Rick Keach. Yeah, he was out for about a half an hour without sunblock on. Yeah, I'll bring in the pictures of Rick at some point. The other thing, weird thing, my chapstick goes on my nose bridge because it's reflecting off of the ground. So that's a great place to get sunburned. And absolutely the roof of my mouth has been sunburned on many occasions. And you can't do much about that. There's no sunblock. You're not going to eat it. So also, hydration, of course, for heat exhaustion. I don't have that in there. Adequate hydration. Good. Burns, in addition to sunburn, again, contact burns, handling your stove. That can, you're handling the stove, you might have gloves on, you might melt the little nylon in your liner gloves, which might attach to your skin and burn it. That's a nasty one. I've had that happen. It's not happy. But these are the little things that can end your trip. Really bad sunburn. That would be a silly way to have to evacuate off of a peak. I grabbed my pot or I spilled water on myself with my pot. So now I've burned and I'm getting cold because my arm is wet. So don't let the little things happen. You got to keep your attention up and just keep the radar up for I don't want to do the stupid little thing that's going to cost me a trip. Okay. Another one, asphyxiation. You wouldn't want to think about ventilating your tent. Two circumstances when asphyxiation can happen. One is if the weather is really bad, you cook in your tent. Kind of funny, one year on Rainier, we set up in a horrible windstorm and just nasty, nasty weather. And Mike and I were tenting together, and all the students dutifully wanted nice ventilated areas and started cooking their dinner outside their tents. And Mike and I looked at them, smiled, and went inside our tent and lit up our stoves inside the tent. Because we'd done it enough before, we kind of knew how that was going to work. And it's much more pleasant to cook inside your tent. But if you don't ventilate, then you get carbon monoxide in your tent, and that would be bad. So you want to make sure that you've got a well-ventilated area for cooking if you're cooking inside your tent. The other thing, the tendency when it gets really cold, is you tend to want to zip your tent up really tight. If you zip your tent up really tight and it snows, and you don't wake up in time to shovel the snow out, then your tent won't ventilate and you start building up CO2 inside your tent. There was an actual case a long time ago, but there was a CMC trip that went to Annapurna 4, and they had a very bad storm at their first camp, and there were 2 tents, and one team, both teams were getting up and shoveling snow in the middle of the night, and one team noticed somewhere in the middle of the night that the other team was not out shoveling. And that was because they had died in their tents because they did not have ventilation, they didn't unzip a little bit. That was their theory anyway, they don't know definitively why, but their tent was zipped up very tight, and they 2 folks in there breathing, and they actually died. So I'm a very big proponent of, I don't care how cold it is, I've got my zipper cracked in my tent. Just do. And shovel continuously and promptly. If you've got a big storm, we had that once on Rainier, where we were getting up in the middle of the night and we were shoveling. I had that at a trip to Alaska a few years back, where it snowed for about a day and a half. So you just got up and shoveled and, chatted and had nice little shoveling parties. And then you went back into my tent and I read a book. And that's how it works. Okay. Snow blindness. I think Mike had a lovely graphic photo of snow blindness in his thing. Okay. So we talked a little last time about sunglasses and glacier glasses, and that's just a must. So you're, again, off the shelf, you'll get about 88% visible light reduction. And if you're never going to do anything bigger than, say, Mount Rainier, you probably won't need anything higher than that. If you're going above 18 or going for a long period of time, a couple weeks at a time, you want to get up into the 94%, 95% visible light. Okay. There are painkillers, there are cold compresses, there's an antiseptic eye drop that you can carry. Do you know the name of that? I know you've had it.
It's on my list. But...
Yeah. So that's something that we can treat, but mostly it's just get out of the sun and keep the pain down until your eyes can start blinking and working their own magic to heal themselves. But that can be a very nasty thing if that happens. Other thing, those are all our minor injuries. First, any questions on minor injuries?
Is snow blindness one that you can keep going after it's recovered from, or
Yeah.
you want to evacuate?
Yeah, you can, particularly if you catch it early, you can put them in the dark for 24 hours and they can come back.
Okay.
Well, even just a sunburn on your eyeballs is very scratchy and uncomfortable.
Yeah. So, yeah, just, again, it depends on the condition of the person, but it can, it's not a mandatory evac. It's a decision.
I forget if it's in the slides, but since we're talking eyes, one thing also is you can have hemorrhages in your eyes, the whites of your eyes. So, you'll have, blood in the white of your eye. It's a superficial thing. It's not something you have to stop your trip for or anything else. It's relatively common as well. And you go, oh my God, what's going on? Is my eye bleeding out or something else? And it just looks a little fun. For other people, it looks strange. It doesn't impair your vision at all because it's just in the white of your eye.
Are there any issues with wearing contacts when your eyes start to have that reaction?
No.
Contact.
So I used to be a contact wearer. I've had PRK since that time, which is similar to snow blindness to a degree. But so I wore. pretty much all my big expeditions were in contacts.
Okay.
And no issues. It matters if you're a good contact wearer, what kind you have, making sure you keep them well hydrated, have spare pairs. I've even had somebody, it's so close, but flick the spike of an ice axe and take my contact out. So I used to use disposable contacts, soft disposable contacts. I'd always have extras. I'd sleep again with that small mesh, I call it ditty bag, where I'd have extra contacts, I'd have eye drops. I would make sure I'm trying to put eye drops in fairly frequently and everything else, but it does not have to prevent you from climbing at all. Now, I also carried a backup pair of glasses, just in case, but that was in case, and I actually never used those on any of my expeditions through and including summit days.
Okay, a couple other, just some resources to be aware of. You want to know what diseases exist in the countries you're going to. In the US, we have the CDC, and you got the World Health Organization. Those are good. They have spots on their webpage for traveler resources. They'll tell you what diseases are going on, what you need to be worried about, what medications you need to take, what vaccinations you need to get. We'll go into that again, a little trip planning. If you call, it's usually probably you want to go 2 or 3 months in advance. The county health department has a travel clinic, and you can go in, you'll say what country you're going to. They'll tell you everything that's going on in that country. They'll scare the living crap out of you. They'll give you all of your inoculations. They'll charge you for it. Some of them might be covered by insurance and you could go to your regular doctor. Some of them you got to get from the health department and you got to pay out of pocket. But know what's going on in those parts of the world. Sometimes it's a weird thing. Chris talked briefly on how his Bolivia trip ended up landing in Lima. It was kind of interesting, is somebody didn't have one of the inoculations that Bolivia wants for people who are visiting the jungles of Bolivia. It might have been a malaria or something like that. They weren't planning to go to the jungle, but at the time, Evo Morales was pissed off at the United States, and so the customs official in Bolivia was saying, no, you can't come into our country until you've had this vaccination. And so they ended up diverting to Lima so they could get a shot and then go back into Bolivia, or it might have just been the land crossing, they didn't care. But in the airport people were telling them they weren't going to be allowed into the country. So there's politics in some of these too, and which guy you get. I know that Ecuador, for example, I've been to Ecuador several times, and they recommend malaria, but only if you're going to elevations below 6,000 feet. So if you're just going on a climbing trip, you don't need it. But those are things you find on the World Health and the CDC. High altitude medicine, this is just kind of a generic website for information and the latest research on high altitude medicine and the Wilderness Medical Society. That's kind of an umbrella organization for several of the ones that I mentioned that offer wilderness medical clinics. I know several people, had questions during the break about what about insurance, what about evacuation stuff. We will be talking about that in a little more detail in the last lecture when we talk about trip planning and preparation. So that is something we will get to. And there's some insurance available. It's not in detail. Most common insurance carriers, if we're talking, some kind of exotic illness, or like a quick policy that you can buy, like the travel insurance that the travel companies will try to sell you. All of those have an exclusion as soon as you put a rope on. And most of them have an exclusion as soon as you cross 5,000 meters. So read the fine print on those type of things. All right. Okay, questions on any of that?
So you said that when you go to Peru, you don't need a malaria shot. So what
Only if you're going to the jungle. If you're going low, you might need it. Yeah, but just if you check the CDC webpage, they'll tell you. And those are good
Greg
things.
mentioned this, but the big thing is don't wait too close, because some of the inoculations have to be multiple weeks apart
Yeah.
from each other on your yellow card. Again, we'll talk about that. So make sure you're leaving, minimum, probably about 2 months.
Yeah, hepatitis C Hep C is getting required in a lot of places, and that's like a 3-shot sequence over several months.
So do you carry your yellow card with you when you travel overseas?
Yeah,
Okay.
I carry it. I've only been asked for it once, ever.
Yeah.
But I always have it, just in case.
It's nice to get backup records. It's nice to get backup records too, in case anything happens to your yellow card.
Yeah.
You can just take your records, and the next time you get a shot, they'll fill out everything from your history, and then your additional shots you got that day.
Yeah. And sort of like know when your last tetanus was in case you put a crampon point through your palm. Like, I don't know, some idiot might do. I don't know who would do that. Okay. So that's our overview for medical things.